Welcome to the Mukilteo Football Show. My name is Miles. Previewing Super Bowl 57. This is part 1 of 3. I've got 3 episodes here. I'll have this one talking about the Eagles and Chiefs' journeys to this point, to Super Bowl 57. We'll have another episode with my beautiful wife, Kathleen, an annual tradition, talking about the halftime show and recent halftime shows. And then we will have my dad and Kirk in for a 3 McGillivray podcast, a dive into the game later in the week. It was kind of nice to not have football today. I know there was the Pro Bowl flag football. I guess I'm not, maybe this is blasphemy, but I'm not one of those guys, you know, I see in the Reddit threads and Twitter and stuff like that, where you just see like, I don't care what football it is. I just love football. And, you know, it's this, they're at the Hall of Fame preseason game. They're like, it sucks, but I'm glad to be watching football. I don't know. I'd like to watch good, meaningful football or not watch it. Am I so out of line on this? Like, I don't want to watch West Virginia Mountain State, take on, Appalachian State without their corner, who's going to the NFL or something like that. I don't care about those bowl games. I don't care about this stuff. I only care about meaningful football. There's enough meaningful football to care about. Though the Pro Bowl was cool, at least in the sense that it was something different. And I like that we got to kind of interact or know the players a little better. They said something at the beginning, which I found to be very true, which was seeing these players without their helmets, without their pads. It's kind of a different way to engage with them. Kind of reminded me of like the NBA. You get to know the guys a little bit more. You kind of get to know their facial expressions and their moods a little bit more. So that was cool. But ultimately meaningless. So today we're going to go through the Eagles, really their journey from their 2017 title to they're on the cusp of a title shot here for 2022 season. And then we will talk Chiefs. And do the Chiefs have a shot at a dynasty? It's sort of a complicated application for a dynasty here, even with a win, because of all the kind of the losses in between and, the hot start. And there's some stuff to tease out of there. So Eagles, Chiefs, let's talk about it. Let's start with the dun, 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 dun. Oh wait, that's Curb Your Enthusiasm. It's Always Sunny. Oh, dun, 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 bum, 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 bum. I was trying to get the theme song for It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. Failed hard at the start of this. We're off to a great start. It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. Philadelphia Eagles. Future football fans looking back at all the titles and playoffs and surfing Pro Football Reference, they may zoom over the 2017 to 2022 Eagles, and they may look at it like it was a great team who stumbled and then got back to the Super Bowl. Like the 86 and the 1990 Giants, the Bill Parcells, Lawrence Taylor Giants. There's a few years in there. The 05 to 08 Steelers, a couple years in the middle. The 07 to 11 Patriots. There's a few years between Super Bowl berths with some tribulations in the middle. People may think of these Eagles as that. Because there are some threads. There are some players who are on both the 2017 team and the 2022 team. There's Fletcher Cox, defensive tackle. Brandon Graham made a huge play in that Super Bowl. Their kicker, Jake Elliott, he's in every Pro Football Reference thing within parentheses on every extra point. And the offensive line: Jason Kelce, center; Isaac Samolo, guard; Lane Johnson, tackle. Those things make it kind of seem like the 2017 to 2022 Eagles sort of have more of a through thread than they do. Because Miles Sanders is drafted in 2019, Jalen Hurts in 2020, Devonta Smith in 2021. You kind of think, okay, the Eagles got back. a future snot-nosed football historian kind of squints and thinks, wow, the Eagles, they went through it, but they got back to the Super Bowl. But we know that today, that is not the case. This is truly a different team. This is something entirely reborn. I mean, Coach Doug Peterson, who won the 2017 Super Bowl with Philadelphia, he's on the Jaguars, and the Jaguars didn't steal him from Philadelphia after he brought them that Super Bowl title. They picked him up after a year after the Eagles fired him. Peterson takes the Eagles back to the playoffs in 2018. They lose on the double doink to the Bears. 2019, they lose to the Seahawks with Josh McCown, and then he is fired 2020 season after finishing 4-11-1. So things at some point had sunk to the point where 3 years later, they're firing their coach. They are getting rid of their quarterbacks. Nick Foles, of course, I mean, somebody who went into a coma after the 2017 Super Bowl when Nick Foles had one of the great playoff runs of all time, back-to-back 350-yard, 3-touchdown games against Minnesota and New England in the title game in the Super Bowl. They would be surprised to hear that Nick Foles just never was relevant ever again. He just fell off the face of the earth. He has thrown 21 touchdowns in 6 subsequent seasons with Jacksonville, Philadelphia, Chicago, Indianapolis. It's amazing. And then, so if you were had went into a coma and you heard, okay, well, hey, the Eagles are back in the Super Bowl 6 years later, this must be the Carson Wentz chance. He got hurt tragically at the end of 2017. They won a Super Bowl without him. It was only kind of awkward, but Wentz, who was an MVP candidate in that 2017 season, surely got them back. And now this will be one of his he'll get a ring for real. But he's been gone for 2 years. They hemorrhaged dead cap to get rid of him. They basically said, we would rather go through hell than keep you as our quarterback. GM Howie Roseman basically made that decision for Carson Wentz, who then went to Indianapolis, who did the same thing there, and then went to Washington and did the same thing there. So they're all having similar experiences with him. So my point is, 2017 to 2022 has gone so low. Not what you would think at all. The position players are all fully turned over. That's pretty normal for any 6-year span of any NFL team. Garrett Blount, Jay Ajayi, Core Clement, Alshon Jeffrey, they're all out of the league. Zach Ertz is in Arizona. And they've got all these, this good young talent. Devonta Smith, A.J. Brown, Miles Sanders, guys who were in college during the Philly special. And the defense, too, of course, is also turned over. That's pretty normal. Fletcher Cox, I said, is still there. I actually think the 2022 Eagles here have a better secondary. They have gone into a nadir. They were pretty bad in the intermediate years, but Darius Slay at the corner, James Bradbury they took from a Giants cap casualty, Avonte Maddox. They've brought in free agents wherever they need to. Corey Gardner-Johnson. It's been pretty good. The Eagles just building depth there. So this is just a unique case. So my whole point is, it's weird that there are any players from the 2017 Eagles team, especially 3/5 of the offensive line, still here, because this is rebirth. So we will see what happens. But the real reason the Eagles are here so far is Jalen Hurts. I mean, yes, I just went on and on about acquiring Slay, Bradbury, Gardner-Johnson, A.J. Brown. They plucked Jordan Mailata from rugby to the NFL. They had Dallas Goedert graduate from the Zach Ertz tight end replacement program. They drafted Smith, drafted Sanders. All of that is really, really good. They wouldn't be here if it wasn't for Jalen Hurts. You had to capture that magic in a bottle again, which is a quarterback that you drafted on a cheap contract and then allows you to spend money everywhere. So Howie Roseman is really doing the same thing he did with the Carson Wentz contract in 2017. He's doing that with Jalen Hurts in 2022. And what do you need? You need that quarterback, that low-paid quarterback, to play really well. And they are getting that. I mean, Hurts, after week 13, 14, 15, when they beat down the Packers, they beat down the Titans, they beat the Giants, and he got hurt in that Giants game. But in that 3-game span, that was December, not that long ago, Hurts was the front runner for MVP at that point. Obviously, the MVP in the mold of Lamar Jackson, where you have to include the rushing yards, 760 rushing yards, 13 touchdowns. It's not been purely numbers, though. This offense leaves behind an impression, especially most of the season, especially early in the year, that they cut through the defense like butter. This was the team in a year when we're all screaming parity the whole time. This was the team that was resting their starters, for the last 8 minutes of the fourth quarter most often. That's the Eagles. I think they got a good chance, but they have rised like the Phoenix out of the ashes. This is not that 2017 team getting back to the 2022 team, and I know that no one thinks it is, but in the future they might. All right, let's take a break, and then we'll talk Chiefs. Now, the Kansas City Chiefs, they're back. They were in, of course, Super Bowl 54. They won that against the 49ers, and Super Bowl 55, in which they lost to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They're very close to being in last year's Super Bowl as well. Just that collapse against the Cincinnati Bengals in the AFC title game meant that the Bengals were the ones representing the AFC in Super Bowl 56. So the Chiefs are bubbling here. They are every year right here in Super Bowl discussion. And the question is, do the Chiefs have a chance on Sunday to become a dynasty? Now, what is an NFL dynasty? Well, McGilvery's dictionary defines it as a team, coach, quarterback combo. You need at least a 3-part combo. You need something that holds the thread together as the same team. Chiefs, Andy Reid, Mahomes, that wins multiple Super Bowls and dominates for a stretch of time longer than just their Super Bowls. So by that, by trying to exclude like 90s Broncos, you can't just win 2 Super Bowls, call yourself a dynasty, and then you're gone. You got to have a stretch of time. You got to have a half decade or a decade of time where you're just the team to beat. You can find dynasties often by the magazines and websites and radio shows being sick of these teams. Who has gotten sick of them? In the 60s, the Lombardi Packers are always there. It's always Bart Starr. Bradshaw, Steel Curtin, Chuck Noll Steelers, Bill Walsh, Joe Montana 49ers, Troy Aikman, Emmitt Smith Cowboys, and of course, the Belichick, Tom Brady Patriots. Those are the dynasties so far. You can't call like Greatest Show on Turf Rams. You can't call them a dynasty. They're 1-1 in the Super Bowls. You don't make it that way. Holmgren, Favre, you don't make it. One thing is critical to being a dynasty for these Chiefs. You're not a dynasty with one Super Bowl win. You have to have multiple. That's obvious. That's clear cut. Their dynasty application needs a win next Sunday or in a future Super Bowl Sunday. They've got to get that. And even then, if they win on Sunday, is that enough? 2 Super Bowls? The Chiefs' application is interesting to me because it's not 4-0 Steelers, right? It's not 5-0 49ers. Those teams got to the Super Bowl. They won it every time. Maybe we can calibrate a little bit for the widespread parity, and the fact that free agency is something much different than it was back in those days, as in it didn't exist back then. So we could calibrate for that a little bit. A win here would make the Chiefs 2-1 in the Super Bowl. They've got a loss in 2020, 2 title game losses, 2018 and 2021. And again, this is like the LeBron argument all over again, and I just get so exhausted with it. 2-1 in the titles in the title game is better than 2-0. It's an amazing phenomenon that people do not believe this. Like, Joe Montana went 4-0 in the Super Bowls, so therefore a guy who went 4-1 is worse because Joe Montana never lost. It makes no sense. Joe Montana didn't just play 4 seasons and win the Super Bowl 4 times. He lost before the Super Bowl. It's the Michael Jordan thing. Like, he 6-0 in the NBA Finals, a perfect guy. Like, well, okay, but in the early part of his career, he existed and he lost before the finals. Therefore, not marking his 6-0. How is that better? Now, Michael Jordan I'm a Michael Jordan over LeBron guy, but that part of the argument always bothers me. Getting to more title games is good. It is something. Anyway, Mahomes, Reed definitely need to win the Super Bowl. We talked about that. This season is a knife's edge. A loss to the Jaguars 3 weeks ago, and we're not even talking Chiefs and dynasty with a 100-foot pole. So I don't know. I don't think if they get this second Super Bowl that it's enough to really call them a dynasty. I think they would need another one. They would need a third one with both Andy Reid coaching and Pat Mahomes quarterbacking. Maybe you need Kelsey or Chris Jones there as well to kind of keep the feel. It can't be like 6 years from now. Because Ronnie Lott kind of ties the 49ers together. Mean Joe Green ties the Steelers together. You gotta have something else keeping it as a dynasty. Oh, yeah. I'm trying to answer the question that I have posed, and I think the Chiefs winning this gives them a shot at a dynasty. As in, the next one they win makes them a dynasty. That's what I think. Now, there is a backdoor way that they can become a dynasty in time rather than in the moment. And that's another thing that happens that is always kind of weird. But it's possible that the Chiefs dynasty could look like a dynasty later. We talked about this with the Eagles, right? When you're zooming, when you're squinting and, looking at Pro Football Reference in 20 years. And the path to that is that no other team wins a second Super Bowl in this entire decade. And that is very possible. So say Chiefs win on Sunday, they get 2 Super Bowls, they've got these 2 title games, they've got a Super Bowl loss, and then no other team ever repeats or even gets back to a Super Bowl or seriously contends. Because the Stafford Rams, probably done. Maybe they'll get another run next year, we'll see. The Brady Buccaneers, definitely done. So there's no other team. You can't be the second best team in your era to be a dynasty. The Chiefs could become the dynasty by just almost by default, by no other team putting up any kind of resume. I'm sure that, the 1980s Joe Gibbs, Washington Redskins or football team or whatever we call them now, that they won 3 Super Bowls, but they're not a dynasty because they weren't better than the 49ers. You can't be a dynasty and be the second best team in your era. The Tom Landry, Roger Staubach Cowboys, you can't be a dynasty because the Steelers were a dynasty while you existed. Just the rules of dynasties. I don't know. I'm really excited that this is even possible. It feels like Mahomes turned a corner. There's a 2.0 version. Tyreek Hill is gone. There's a shorter, more patient gameplay, a new offensive line that is playing really well. Travis Kelce is there, but it's just kind of a bunch of other guys, Juju, MVS, McKinnon, Tony. I know there's going to be a lot of health discussion around all these guys and Pacheco and stuff like that. We'll talk about that with Dad and Kirk, but it's very interesting to me because they did the Tyreek Hill. They got a lot of draft capital. They got McDuffie and Watson on the corners, Karlofton on the edge. The defense has been reinforced by the haul from the Tyreek Hill trade. Remember, they got a 1st, 2nd, and 4th last year. They got a 4th next year, and I think another pick in there. We're building. And this Chiefs defense, the Spagnuolo defense, while Spagnuolo has been here, and so has Chris Jones, and so has Frank Clark, it is pretty much turned over from Super Bowl 54. I think Frank Clark and Chris Jones are the only guys with rings that are playing in this game. Like, Again, this is Super Bowl 57. Super Bowl 54 was not that long ago. It's amazing. The turnover in the NFL. Matthew is gone, replaced by Houston safety Justin Reed. Chiefs have a couple of great linebackers now, Willie Gay, Nick Bold. We'll talk more about that, but this is the legacy game. This is a dynasty first interview, I guess you could say. That's how I will put it. And another thing that will help bolster this is if the Chiefs win this game. So if the Eagles win this game, it'll be about the victory falling all the way to the very bottom of the NFL. At the end of 2020, going into draft day, the Eagles were a laughingstock team, one of the bottom barrel teams. If you ranked, like, what the heck are they doing? They're stuck with Carson Wentz. The Eagles were absolutely bottom 4 NFL teams at one point in between here. If they win, they will pull off a from the top to the bottom, back to the top story, and it'll be amazing. If the Chiefs win, they will get that dynasty first interview, as I said. It will also be the Mahomes ankle injury year. You will refer to this year as the ankle year for Mahomes. I wouldn't be surprised if that's what it's called, the day after. I always say legacy is not fair. Memory and narrative matters more than it should. Stuff that players have no control over matters to their legacy. It sucks, but that's legacy, baby. So I'm really interested to see what plays out. Those are the NFL historical stakes for the Chiefs and Eagles. We'll be back later this week, talk to Kathleen about halftime shows, talk to Kirk and Dad about the game itself. Mukilteo Football Show. My name is Miles, tuning out. We'll see you this week. Bye.